this cosplay rescue put on by SheProp, which is one of my favorite community groups ever. SheProp is a safe space for marginalized genders, female identifying, two-spirit, under the trans umbrella, cosplayers, prop makers, artists, etc. It's a really wonderful community. We have homes on Facebook groups, on Discord, we have Instagram. There is a lot of content. Panels like this we often record and share, or we do online panels, Q&A, crafting sessions. It's really fantastic. And these are some of our wonderful members. SheProp's whole thing is community education and engagement, to sound very corporate about it, but we really like helping each other learn and helping teach things with other people. So how this panel is going to work is, it's generally speaking, the goal is this is an open Q&A workshop. So if you have an idea that you want feedback on, you're stuck on, we've never cosplayed before, you don't know where to start, or you don't know where to start with a specific character, like literally anything. But if you have something you're like actively working on, we have a lot of expertise across here. And we would love to help with anything. So we're going to get started with a little bit of information about all the panelists, and they're each going to share a story of a project that they got stuck on, got help with, or new skills on. Sometimes we are in need of a cosplay rescue. Like the last time I had this panel and my beard wouldn't stick on, I had to be rescued from myself. I was Obi-Wan Kenobi, and it doesn't really play without the beard. Okay, so first up, Elemental.
Hi, I'm Elemental Cosplay. So my main thing is sewing. My grandmother started teaching me to sew, oh good Lord, 35 years ago. And so I generally help people with that a lot. I don't do commissions. What I like to do if someone asks me for that is say that I will guide you through sewing the costume so that you can learn how to do this. But I'm going to talk about a build where I did need help. I had tried to dabble in foam and Worbla, and that stuff is really expensive to constantly fuck up. And so I really wanted to make a Mando Elsa costume, and it involves a lot of armor. And one of my friends who had just moved to North Carolina, I was in Chicago at the time, is really good with armor, but not great with sewing. So we decided we would rescue each other. And every Thursday for months, we got on Zoom and we made our costumes and told each other what to do. So you can see there a lot of different stuff that she helped me with and ideas. Like, for instance, I never would have thought to use a wood burning tool on EVA foam. And it turns out really well, but do it outside. And then the helmet was 3D printed in several pieces, and I had at first tried to myself figure out what I was doing with it. And the other issue is there's lots of tutorials online, but she knows me and how I'm going to interpret something that is said to me. A lot of tutorials are from great cosplayers who aren't necessarily great teachers. And so they skip a lot of steps and think that you'll infer it. I will not. And so, you know, she gave me a lot of very detailed help in how to finish it, how to sand it, and how to paint it, and doing the foam armor. Also tips like, you know, on the wristlets to put a little bit of Worbla at the end, and then use a leather punch so that your ties don't tear through the foam. Things like that. That's stuff I would have never thought of if it wasn't for her. And then, so she at the same time built a Mando Merida, and then I taught her how to sew all of the pieces of her costume that needed to be sewn. And so I was rescued big time while I was also rescuing someone else.
That was really cool.
Yeah, so this is my finished Mando Elsa. Yeah, a baby Yolof is like my favorite thing that I've ever made in my entire life.
So cute. Okay, we'll hop back and let's do quick introductions, I think, for each person down the line, and then SoCal, you're going to be next.
Next now and
Intro, and then,
got it.
intro, and then everybody else is going to go down the line. Just say who they are really quick.
Yeah.
I misunderstood what was happening.
Well, you did such a good job.
Yeah.
Look, it doesn't matter if it doesn't follow the framework. That's why you have a moderator. All you, Alex.
Hi, I'm SoCal Costumes, Alex, and I mostly sew. I do not do foam work. I did do a leather project, which is what my thing is going to be predominantly about. But I have recently gotten into screen printing, which is really fun and very different. And now I have paint all over everything. So.
Hi, I'm Ustrina Rising. I also go by Kev. I've been cosplaying for close to a decade, and I have taken a grand total of 1 sewing class in my life. I mostly sew, but I am also that person who I will see a character and I will love them, and I will say, I don't care what I have to do, I will learn how to make anything I need for this costume, whether that's foam work, leather work, warbler work, electronic work, that brain lights up on there. And I just, my gay audacity and just lets me believe that I can do whatever I want, and I will reach out to whoever I need to make that happen.
Hi, I'm RoseyGCosplay, or Becca. So I mainly do sewing, I do lots of makeup, I also do, I specialize in body paint, because I love body paint, and I also do a lot of corsetry and puppet making. So asking for help is my favorite thing, because sometimes I get very lost in projects, and that's okay. So yeah, I get help all the time from my mentor. Shout out to Kinetic Costumes, my mentor. So very, very excited to be here. Also, side note to interject, Rosie G just won, I believe, Best Recreation in Masquerade last night. And Becca actually made a point to share the build book with with SheProp last week, and people really loved it. Yeah, it was great. Good job. Congrats.
Thank you.
Okay, Trilliankaye.
Hello, I'm Trilliankaye Cosplay, or Stephanie. I primarily specialize in makeup, but saying if I see a character, I'm going to make it happen. I made this cosplay happen in like a week, working full-time and being a single mom. So if I want to do it, I'm going to do it. But I primarily work in makeup. I taught myself over the last 4 years. I primarily did a lot of the work during COVID, so I just did TikToks from, arms up, and then just kept working on it. So, but I hit my shovels too, so. But YouTube's my favorite, or my best friend.
I am TemaTime, or you can call me Tema, and I also do a little bit of everything, although I really hate sewing. But I mostly do a lot of leather work, wigs, props, some makeup stuff, obviously, everything that there is to do. I didn't do leather working until like a couple years ago, and I was like, I'm gonna do this leather thing, and then now I'm like, wait, leather is way easier. So I do a lot of that. I've been cosplaying for 18 years, and so that is a testament to the fact that you've never been doing this too long to need help. It doesn't matter if you're a master, there will always be new things to learn, you will always need assistance. This is a very leather and makeup heavy costume that I definitely needed assistance with. And actually, my makeup mentor, Skin Tricks, actually came to see and he was the person that helped me make this arm in the first place. I had a lot of questions, so many questions. So yeah, it's never too late to ask for help.
Okay. All right, so Alex, we're going to come back around to you.
For your belt. Yes, this is the insanity that is a Ray costume. This costume took five-ish years for me to put together. I am a big believer in slope building and also remaking things 1,000 times because you're obsessed with getting exactly right. So in a way that I got help with this costume is, I think it's on the backpack picture, you can see it. There was little pieces of hardware all over this bag. I wish I had counted them, I did not.
and I could not find it anywhere. Specifically, there was a tiny little chain on one of the shoulders, and it is a very specific, it's on the little bottle there on the front. I think it might have looped around in the picture. Yeah, that right there. And all it does is go in the top of it and then loop around to the bottom of it. That's it. And I was obsessed with finding the exact right chain. Didn't know what it was called. I'm not a jewelry maker. I've got no idea what to even call this. I'm looking up a loopy chain. That's all chains. And so I'm texting a friend who's equally as obsessed with finding the exact right thing. And she's like, oh, I know exactly what that is. It's this gauge, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, cool, thank you. I look it up, yep, thousands of options. None of them will get to me in time for the shoot that you can see in the last photo. So I'm like, well, I guess I'm taking a trip down to downtown LA. Went with a friend for moral support. And went through every single jewelry shop going, hey, this thing, it's called gauge blah, 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 blah. And everybody's looking at me like I'm insane. And so I'm stuck with going through every single rack, thousands of chains. I finally find it. You use that much, and you're left with a yard of it. But I have it. But yeah, I love sewing. I do. It's just something that clicks in my head. But when it comes to things like leather work or, okay, great, this is hardware. What do you even call that? It's a metal loop thing. What do I put into Google? Having friends with a diverse background of what they're equally obsessed in, like jewelry, comes in handy. And yeah, I would never have found that chain. I would have just gone with something else in the end. But that is, and you can see on this costume how much hardware there is. Like it's just an insane amount of hardware, and all you're left with is a metal loopy thing. There you go.
Amazing. So my character was Ashton Graymore from Campaign 3 of Critical Role. You can see is a literal rock, an earth genasi made of crystal. And I was like, that one, I want to do that one. But body paint, unlike Becca, it scares the living heck out of me. But also like Becca, I knew Kinetic Cosplay and my friend Allie, or Chidori Sour, who used to make arm socks for them. Literally, I was so intimidated by arm socks. I avoided all body paint characters, but when I saw this dumb punk rock, I knew I needed to just embody them. So I messaged Allie and I was like, hey, I'm not gonna touch these arm socks for like another 8 months, but can you help me? And she sent a whole video. I still have it in my Dropbox of just like how to go through it, how to make the hand form. But this project was an example of sometimes the best advice will still not be, I don't want to say not be enough, because it wasn't that her advice wasn't good, it's that my machine just wanted to eat everything I put in it. So the first evening, I was like, Allie, help me, my machine ate my tights, which I got 2 pairs because I am a big believer of buy enough to mess up at least once and be able to make it all again, and it means I have a lot of extra fabric when I end up surprising myself and not messing up. So I messaged her and I'm like, what do I do? And so she said, put tissue paper between your dog feeds and the fabric to keep it from being eaten. So I did that, and my machine still ate it. And I was like, great, this is totally fine, because on this first set of tights, I can just keep making hands all the way up it because I don't need to wear them. So then she was like, maybe try printer paper underneath. It's a bit thicker, it won't get sucked down. And I was like, awesome, printer paper. It was going so well until I was like, it's not perfect. I need to change it just a little bit, and then it got eaten again. And at that point, I'm at my wit's end, because by this point, I had tried so many times. This was my final set of tights, and I didn't want to buy a new pair, but I was just at my wit's end. I like sent her this whole paragraph, and I'm like crying in my room when I look at the character design again. And I realize that there are cuffs on Ashton, like right at the wrists. And I think this is a very good example of being willing to throw away your initial concept. Arm socks are traditionally made in one piece, sometimes with a zipper in the seam to take your hands out. but I was given this golden opportunity, and I remember We Love Colors, which is the company I bought my tights from, which a lot of cosplayers will buy their tights from. Cosplayers use their company so often that they actually have started making seamless gloves. And they will be wrist gloves, they will go up here, but as I was looking at the character and the gloves, I was like, wait, I can just hide my crimes. I can just hide my failure.
Loves to hide a crime.
And it was brilliant. So I took my tights and I just cut the feet off.
Yep.
And I was like, if I can't make these hands, I can't make these hands. I can buy the gloves. I did have the financial ability to buy those. And then it ended up being a friggin' masterpiece. And no one can see it in my costume. I would not have been able to start this project without my friend's help, and by the time I had my entire mental breakdown at 1 a.m. and bought the gloves, she messaged me back and was like, that was genius, good job. And I was like, thank you, I cried a lot about it, but it is one of my favorite things I've made to this day.
Funny story about Kev and I. The first time we met, you know exactly what I'm going to say. I was wearing that costume. I was 16 years old, and I look at Kev, who's dressed up as Lapis, and they're painting their arms again.
Yeah.
And I knocked the entire alcohol paint all over the WonderCon steps.
I never wore it again, like I was never intending on wearing it again, so it was good, but I didn't want an arm sock so bad that I airbrushed my entire body and I was blue for a week.
Yep. Well, for mine, so a little backstory. I did an internship at the Jim Henson Company as a puppet maker for the My Neighbor Totoro stage play. And they invited me to come to this convention at the Marriott by Universal Studios called The Great Conjunction. And it was a convention all dedicated to The Dark Crystal, which is one of my favorite films of all time, as well as my favorite Netflix series. So I decided to enter their costume contest, but then I bit off more than I could chew. And I was like, oh no. So my corset, I needed to get a special foot for, and so I hit up Mari, Kinetic Costumes, and I was like, hey, can I use your industrial machine? Because she owns one and has access because she is in the industry in the 705. So great on that. And it's real leather, ethically sourced, I promise. And then I got a lot of help on the embroidery on the skirt because my machine was also eating that fabric like nobody's business. Because it's this very thin, like crushed, like organza kind of type thing. And then I think the most help I got was from my friend Atlas, who is wearing that costume in those pictures. They helped me sculpt everything that's on the bodice, on the armor, because out of foam clay, because I am not a sculptor, I am just a seamstress and a makeup artist. I am not a sculptor. So luckily they were able to step in and really help me out in that regard and just teach me how to use foam clay, teach me that you take a little bit of water and you go, woo. So that was really good, and they were really supportive on everything that I did, as well as Mari. They even came out to the convention just to see me compete, so that was really, really special. So I'm really proud of that costume, and I think my friends that helped me out are really proud of it too. Thank you.
Okay, so like I said, I don't sew, I don't make, I buy most of my cosplays. I have no shame in that. So I piece them together, and that's pretty much what I do. So, but my thing is makeup. I have never touched makeup prior to, say, like 4 years ago. I just thought one day, you know what, I want to try makeup. It was really bad at first, but I kept going. They say successful people believe in themselves like in a very unhealthy way. Like no matter what, successful people believe they can do it even if they can't. So I like to think that I can do it. I'm going to make it a way. I'm going to find out a way. So a lot of my top pictures are of like my before work where I was first starting out with body paint. I didn't really know how to sculpt my face. I was kind of just throwing the paint on and thinking like I'm good. And then I started realizing like you couldn't really see the structure of my face. I needed to really start doing like more, you know, texture to my face. So I started learning how to do that. And then on the right side are my nows compared to before, and that's 4 years of just literally just sitting and doing it. Like I said, during COVID, I literally would just sit. I was a stay-at-home mom. I worked from home, and I would just sit and do my makeup, and I would just sit and do it for hours. Right? My kids are here. I'm sure they can attest to how many hours I've spent in front of that like TikTok doing TikToks. And so I just kept pushing. You know, I'd get really frustrated. There's plenty of times where you have to trust the process. Like you're half painted and you're just like, what is this? I look crazy. And so there's a lot of times you're like, no, it's gonna get there. And you have to keep telling yourself it's gonna get there. And so I've asked a lot of makeup artists that I follow on TikTok for tips. I watch a lot of YouTube. Like, you know, Tema said that you can never be too good to ask for help. And I think a lot of makeup artists are willing to help as long as you're willing to ask. You don't have to be embarrassed to be like, hey, like how'd you get such a better texture on your body paint? And there are so many things that I've learned from, like, you know, putting in a thickness and some more water versus, you know, just kind of doing it dry. And it's just a lot of time sitting and watching and just trying and doing it over and over and over again. I've done a lot of the same looks over and over and over, purposely so I can get better and I can do better. So like I said, the top work, you know, I just did Hella again. Just recently. Poison Ivy, that's supposed to be a Orion slave girl next to my Ivy, but that's Ive from the Harley Quinn show. So again, I do more texture. I started doing contacts. I was afraid of contacts for the longest time. I didn't want to touch my eyeball. And now I have no issue with contacts. I can get them in there. I'm more wigs and makeup than anything. I have a really big thing. I like to cross-utilize. Anything I buy, I have to at least be able to use it in 2 to 3 cosplays. Because as a single mom, I ain't got no money. And this can be an expensive hobby, but it doesn't have to be. I think that's my biggest thing with makeup. I'm a drugstore girl. You know, I'm not about to use Fenty, you know, just wiping it off in, you know, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. So I think that it's never like you have to do all the expensive things, have the expensive tools in order to be good. I use paintbrushes. You know, Marone has tons of other things you can buy, but I buy 99-cent paintbrushes, and they work just as well. So I think that my biggest thing from now to now is also I have attention to detail. I'm a Gemini, so like I can't help it. Like it has to be detailed. And so like my now work, I try to more focus on doing characters that I can embody. I don't just do any character. Like I do a character, I think, okay, you know what, I love that character. I'm gonna be able to act that character, so I do that character. So a lot of times I just stare at the picture, and I watch the movie, and I watch the scene, and I watch it over and over and over and over and over and over. And I try to just build that in my mind, and then I just go for it. And then I just have the confidence. And if it turns out great, if it doesn't, like you said, you hide it. You just hide it with a little filter, you know, no one's gonna know the difference. But yeah, so that's primarily it. So 4 years, and I feel like I've come pretty far, but I've not stopped, and I still have plenty to learn, so, yeah.
Hello. Today I'm here to talk about these freaking arms. So silicone is a really interesting material to work with in that it is very picky. You have to use the right exact paint and the right exact glue and the right exact everything. And if you want to glue something to silicone, you have to make sure that if the object isn't, you know, you generally also silicone it, nothing will glue to it. Like it's very difficult to work with. That's why I had to ask my friend Skin Tricks over here for a lot of questions. You know, it did turn out well. But one of the many issues I had was that these silicone does not breathe. So it just gets nice and sweaty and awful in there. This is probably the warmest costume I have ever made and worn. And I live in SoCal, so that's, you know, brilliant of me. So the arms would get very hot and they would start to slide down, which looked absolutely like terrifying, I've been told. Actually, like is your arm, like is your skin, there's something going on? So I was like, okay, well, how am I gonna like hold them up? I was like, well, I don't know, like I can't just like attach straps, I can't just sew onto silicone. And one of the other things I found out is that vinyl denatures silicone, so if like silicone touches something that's vinyl for like, you know, if it just sits there, it just sort of melts. So like, you know, it's just, there's so many different things that you have to be super careful about. So I was like, well, how am I gonna like, I was like, okay, well maybe I'll use silicone, but like I couldn't figure out like, you know, like I can't just like silicone by itself is just gonna stretch and break. And so I tried finding online like, you know, medical silicone straps and things like that, and a lot of them were just too small or just like massive, and it wasn't working. I was trying to figure, I was like, okay, well, if I could pour silicone into like a strap, like they, you know, whatever, that could work, but the silicone's just gonna rip. And it was literally like a week or 2 that I had been chewing on this problem. And I was like, I don't know how I'm gonna do this. And so I actually went to, you know, and like I said, this was in the last year, which by the way, this whole costume, like I started in like June and I only just finished it like a month ago. Like it takes a while. But I've been doing this for so long, and my friend over here, Circadian, who cosplays as Izzy Hands, has only been cosplaying for about a year or two, and I was venting about how frustrated I was. I was like, I don't know how I'm gonna do this. Like, I don't know if I pour a strap, it's just gonna rip. And they just very casually were like, huh, well, why don't you just put like fabric in there, like a mesh or like a tool or something? Like, wouldn't that give it support? And I was like so mad at myself. I was like, yes, that would work. God damn. How did I not think of that? Oh my God. And so like right then and there, I like hot glued a bunch of cardboard together to like make a mold, and I got some tool and I poured the silicone in and I put the tool in and I poured over it and it cured, and I went to go like really yank it, and it was very supported. It wasn't going anywhere, and I was like, 2 weeks. 2 weeks I've been stressing about this, and you just casually were like, what if you just did this in like 2 minutes? So it's like, it really is like, how many years you've been doing this just doesn't matter. Even if you've been doing this for a long time, sure, you can, ask people on TikTok, you can ask friends of yours that have been cosplaying for a long time, but sometimes it really doesn't hurt to even just ask people who haven't been doing this a long time, because they have different experiences and they have different brains and they can just think of brilliant things. And yeah, it immediately worked. And then I had to figure out how to attach it to the arm. And so I actually ended up using silicone caulking for like housing stuff, which I actually really like, because it's designed to stick to like grout and tile and windows and all this other stuff, which like generally silicone doesn't like stick to everything. So I found that when you're working with it, a lot of times silicone caulking is really, really handy, because it's a little different than regular silicone glue. And so I used a bunch of silicone caulking, and I glued the strap on the inside. And so whenever I wear this, I run it under my compression shirt on the inside, and I see if you pin it down on the shoulder, and it pulls the whole thing up, and no matter how much I sweat, this arm stays right here. Nobody gets freaked out or grossed out. It's like, your skin is moving, what's going on there? So yeah, it just goes to show that, it really doesn't matter how experienced or inexperienced someone is. Everybody's a fountain of knowledge that you can plunder. So yeah.
Thanks, Emma. And my compliments to the panelists. Timing was so perfect. So with that, we get to the audience participation part of this. So if you have any questions about active projects, ideas, whatever, I think it's small enough that you can just stand up instead of going to the mic. But if people can't hear, I'm going to make y'all start going to the mic. Okay. No, yes, you. With the shark. And then
Yeah, Claire.
Oh, that was bad
Something-
moderating.
I have a question. So,
Sorry.
No way.
You're too far. This is why people go to the podium. I can't see what you guys are doing down there. Stop disrupting. It's so unprofessional. Okay, Jinx, please. I'd love to hear your question.
so I have my old fishbone. He's not here today.
Yes.
Fishbone is a giant shark.
It's a shark.
Yeah, my literal brain was
Shark gun.
okay.
Yeah.
And so the first time I made them out of foam floor tiles and glue, and screws. I will never do that again.
Oh.
Oh my goodness.
Girl, barge cement exists.
I know, I didn't know that.
Let her ask the question.
I need you to know. What's the question?
Just start shouting at it.
Question.
I'm sorry.
I did the same thing on my first foam project. I was like, I don't know what contact cement is. Hot glue. E6000. It's awesome.
So rough. But so I really want to make because, but I found my biggest issues with my current fishbone is that he is so delicate. Like I will do one thing, I'll be like, oh, my head, I decapitated him on Friday. It was so great. But like, what would I do to remake him and make him like more sturdy, like keep like the lightweight thing?
How thick is the foam you're using? And what kind of adhesive are you using
I
now?
used hot glue the first time. I really used contact cement.
Yeah.
I used nice time.
So that'll help a lot, and with the contact cement, put it on part of it, let it sit, kind of like eyelash glue, let it get gummy, then attach the other pieces to it.
It also helps if you put it on little things that
Yeah. And also if it's weird angles or whatever is happening, with the contact cement, my friend Evie Cosplay told me to start using that, it's stuff for cars. It's like a little tube that's like auto bond, and put that on the outside. So the contact cement is putting it together, and then the auto bond on the outside of it, and that actually helped a lot. None of my pieces ever moved when I walked. It was awesome.
That's also another thing you can do, which is really great for if things do start to rip or tear or break, is that I'll sometimes take like a light fabric and glue that on the inside, which will help hold things together so that they're not being pulled as much, because the fabric will act as like an extra support, and it's very light, and you can use a stretch fabric or you can use, you know, a cotton, whatever, but I find that that really helps.
Becca, did you?
It's
Becca
okay.
had their hand up, and then you can give one.
I mean, I was just gonna suggest using installation foam, like the foam that you can carve, and then you take the expanding foam and put a little bit in there to keep it together. That would be what I would do.
My question is, did your fish bones have like an internal skeletal system when you put them together? One of the first projects I made was like this giant hulking ghost, and I used the metaphor of I gave it muscles, but I didn't give it bones. So if you can figure out like an EVA type of situation, I pulled up like a reference of fishbone, but even just like straight and then having it go up to the head and like down to the jaw, having that so like it isn't just hollow on the inside. If it gets knocked about, like it'll stay there. And also, how do you prime your foam before painting? Plastidip? Okay, awesome. I was about to say, like, because Plastidip will do wonders for just like gluing everything together, and like don't be afraid to like use 4 layers and let them completely dry between them, otherwise they get weird texture, which sometimes you don't want. But skeletal systems in big props can be very helpful, and PVC is pretty light, so. Yeah.
Thank you, that's a great question. Do we have another one? We just got the 15-minute sign, so.
I think right here in the glasses was next, yeah.
Great. Yeah, please come up so we can hear.
I'm very soft-spoken anyway, so thank you. I recently bought one of those pre-made like Sailor Moon costumes, and the little pendant thing for the bow is just kind of like threaded once on the little bow, like the gem or whatever. And it's all well and good from the front, but when you turn, it's like flipping up and down, and it kind of looks kind of awkward. And a long time ago, I had a similar situation where I had a bow and I wanted to put a cupcake. It came as a button in the middle of it, and I sewed it to it, but it was doing the awkward, like not staying in one place, and I hot glued it, and it looked really bad. So I was wondering what you would suggest for that.
Okay, so I've had this problem on multiple occasions. So and my 2 options are industrial style Velcro that you can sew on, or you can use magnets, so you can still wash your costume. So they have magnets at Joann's that fold into, like, you cut a hole, like a small slit in the fabric, and you fold the 2 edges out so it stays in place. And then you can also fold the edges out on the pendant and then glue it in place with either hot glue E6000, and it'll be able to come off really easily and stay in place.
Such a cool product.
Life blown.
And when you buy the magnets, neodymium magnets.
Yes.
Those, they will hold through your finger or hand.
You can find them by searching rare earth magnets on Amazon, because that's another name for them, because neodymium is kind of hard to remember. So yeah, if you look up rare earth magnet on like Amazon, it says rare, but they're not like super expensive or anything.
No.
You get the little ones, and
Be careful when you use them.
Yeah.
I've injured myself on many a magnet.
They have a very, very strong, very strong.
I've caught my skin in
All right,
it.
I think we have time for another question.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I like your backpack. Who, I think Adrian was first.
Okay, so I'll stand up, I guess. So I have a character. I was cosplaying him yesterday, and he has a full arm wrapped across, kind of like this. And I wanted to make something like out of fabric where it was like kind of a sleeve that I could put on and take off. And I tried, like, I had this old sock that was like long enough, and I didn't know what the other one was. So I was like, okay, I can use this. It like fits my arm. I can add a zipper to it and like sew this on, but it wasn't working out. Like it was too tight. I wasn't able to like adjust it the way I needed to, and it was just really frustrating. And I ended up buying the opposite fabric today. But I wanted to get something usable, so I'm not constantly bringing stuff with body paint, so it's not usable, that kind of thing. So I just wanted to know what you guys would suggest for that kind of thing.
Cosplaying Ray all the time.
Yes.
I have answers for this. So if you don't care about a seam on the inside, life becomes so much easier. Compression sleeves.
Okay.
Like you can go to any like CVS, Walgreens, any kind of compression sleeve, and then you can cut it down to where you want, or just I fold mine over even. And then because I'm me, I wrap it myself every single time. But if you want something you can just slip on real fast, use a zigzag stitch on a sewing machine, and that will let it stretch. And then you can do the zipper thing, and that should, easy peasy. But yeah, if you want to be insane like me and hand wrap it every time, I would suggest like it's the glue that they put on strapless bras, and I cannot remember what the product is called, but you put it at the top, and that's what keeps it up on your arm. So you go to silicone. Yeah, it's definitely a silicone, and that will keep it up on your arm, keep it from slipping down all day.
I use boob tape. Boob tape.
Or like wig glue,
Yeah, like
that kind of
a
thing.
little flat
Yeah.
color boob tape, yeah.
I have a suggestion. So I work at Universal Studios, and for our Bride in the Park, we have you know when you have like an invisible little like piece on like a garment from Windsor or something like that that's like a mesh? You can go to the fabric district, buy that mesh, and then use a zigzag stitch as they were saying, and just sew a sleeve together and then hand tack all the gauze onto the sleeve. But it will look beautiful.
I may ask you later.
That's what matters.
Awesome.
Great question.
Yes. I've had to fix so many.
Okay, do we have another question? Your hand was up on the last round.
I was just wondering if you've ever worked with characters that have a crew cut, because I'm planning David Martinez from Cyberpunk Edgerunners, and I really don't want to go to a barber and show him the picture, and it's like, all right, mess me up, So,
That's a question.
yeah, so, and,
Because like a shaved side.
Oh my gosh, okay.
yeah.
What was the character's name?
David Martinez, I have it here.
Yeah, bring it up, please.
I highly recommend, there's like a wig store that has something like that.
I know Arta
like that.
makes
Arta
a couple
wigs.
of undercut
It
wigs.
has a couple different ones
Yeah.
like that, yeah.
Yeah, so
ARDA wigs has a couple different wigs that are like that come in a couple different colors,
Okay.
so.
and there are a couple ways you can do things like this depending on what you want it to look like. You can Frankenstein wigs and bald caps together. That would be sort of the advanced
We have a lot of
method.
wigs.
And the other thing you can do with some of those Arta wigs is it's essentially like you won't actually have a buzz cut, but it's very, very short wig fibers. And then you would sort of just like paint the skin tone onto it as you want. Frankensteining a wig cap is gonna probably be your best bet to get it to look like very realistic. And the good news is that there are fantastic YouTube tutorials for wig caps. And like, we live in an age where there's so many resources for cosplayers. Like 10 years ago, none of this existed. But definitely like bald cap and see how other cosplayers have done this. Because I know that Cyberpunk has been a pretty popular show and there will be people somewhere who have shared how they've done this thing.
Also, if you do the bald cap idea, the type of clips you want to put under it are toupee clips.
Toupee clips.
Because toupee clips are made, for shorter wigs.
All right,
They're
cool.
very low profile.
Thank you.
All right. In the pink hair in the back.
I have a question in terms of when you're first starting out.
Can you speak up a little bit louder?
Yes, sorry. What tips would you have for people kind of creating new patterns for costumes that are a little bit more obscure?
I got you. So basically, I highly recommend either making or finding a pattern block of your torso. So it's basically the most basic representation of a garment, and it will have a dart here and a dart here, usually a fisheye dart and just a regular dart, and then you can work off of that pattern to create patterns that you're interested in. Like my biggest suggestion, either for a like a princess theme garment where it's just a line down the front, always draw through your apex, which is where the bust line is, to create that protruding shape. So I highly recommend, it's called a sloper. I bet you know what a sloper is, yeah.
And also, when you're making your own patterns, it's important to remember that even though some of the seams look straight when the garment is on, you do not make it with a straight seam, and you need something called a French curve ruler that is made to help you do those curves, help you pattern those curves.
Or a hip curve.
Yes, please.
So for the cosplay I was wearing yesterday, I was basically just making a shirt from scratch with no pattern, because again, it's really obscure shapes. One thing that you have to do, you have to be really careful about it, but you can carefully wrap yourself in saran wrap, preferably with the help of a friend, and then layer duct tape in small strips so that it contours to your body, and then cut it yourself out of it with a scissors very carefully, and then you can draw with Sharpie on that and cut out the patterns, and then when you trace it onto like something to make a mock-up, you can adjust the patterns and straighten it out and make it a lot neater. It works really well for me, and if you have someone who's able to help you with that, it's a really great way to do more obscure shapes.
Also, please do not get frustrated. You're doing something that is like super complex, and like they keep saying, bodies are not straight lines. It's gonna look funky. I can't tell you, almost every single one of my costumes that I make, I put on and I'm like, I turn it inside out, and then I just pinch. And I pinch and pinch and pinch and pinch, and I figure out, okay, how do I get this fabric, which every fabric's gonna be totally different, and how it reacts to you pinching it, until I get it to react the way I want. So you gotta be patient with it, and I have a box called a UFO box. It is my unfinished projects box, and it's all the boxes that made me angry enough to get a timeout. Some of them have been in there for 10 years. That's how long their timeout has been. Don't at me. Almost every sewist I know has a box like this, and we glare at it every time we see it because we don't want to open it. Do not let yourself become the person with a UFO box, because there's no coming back from it after you start it.
There isn't, and every time I go in my sewing room, I tell my UFO box to fuck off.
Yep. You become very bitter at the UFO box.
And the first time you make a pattern yourself, go into it telling yourself, I am going to do this multiple times, so that you don't get frustrated. You need, just go in with that attitude.
Okay.
I know that the,
In the red, okay, let's go to that. They just gave me the 10 minutes, so let's stay efficient. Let's try and keep it to 2 responses per question. We can run through a couple.
I have a question about wings. What would be the best way to make a wearable skeleton, and what would be the best way to store them?
So I design a ton of fairy costumes. It depends on what you want to make your wings out of. Do you know what do the wings, what do you want them to look like? What texture do you want them to have? And are you trying to use like feathers on it? Yeah. Okay, so, and what are you wearing on top? Okay, so what I do a lot, if you don't want to have the straps, is I cut a slit in the back of my top. I sew bias tape on the top and bottom of the slit to make sure it doesn't keep tearing. Wear a corset underneath, and then you're going to make a U-bar out of wire that sticks inside of the corset. And that'll hold the wings up, even if they're big. The U-bar wire needs to be way thicker than the wire you use to make the skeleton out of. And that you can, there's lots of different ways depending on what you want it to look like, but if you're putting feathers on it, like it's not see-through, it's not as, you can mess it up and nobody's gonna know. But yeah, and the wire you can use for the skeleton can just be like a thin gauge wire, or you can use the thicker wire just on the outside, so like on the top of the wings you have now.
The other thing, so right now, is what you're wearing a pull down, like pull over your head type of situation? Okay, so the other thing you can do is you can literally just like take apart a backpack sometimes and stick it under your clothes. If your thing doesn't have like a center opening, then like if you're comfortable with cutting the back and sort of adding invisible zippers or snaps that can go around the wings, U-bars are fantastic. Like ideally a corseted structure, you want to have something that's going to redistribute the weight so it's not all on your shoulders, ideally the hips. The first time I did something like this, I think I took like a fanny pack and I like sewed a bar that like put weight on my hips, and then I would cut holes into my clothing. So it was literally all one piece. So you will have to sacrifice whatever you're wearing most likely to dedicate it only to this project. But you can do a lot just sort of by looking at how people mount things and redistribute weight, and then using that for the wings.
All right, so they've just rolled out the stop sign. This was really great. I learned a lot of new things actually, like what a French curve is for.
Yes.
But okay, if you would like to ask any more questions, some of us will be outside afterwards for a little bit. And in the meantime, thank you for coming and for asking and answering questions. Join SheProp on Facebook, Discord, etc. Just search for SheProp Community. Thank you.